fellow Southern Cameroonians and Bazonians. This is Capo Daniel. I want to pass you guys a small news and updates, as well as give you some small story to open your eyes to know the state of the struggle for the restoration of the statehood of British Southern Cameroon. So I know today is Sunday. A lot of people are busy. It is about 8 p.m. in Asia, and I hope after church services in Amberland, a lot of people have time to check social media and check updates. So today, the big news is the diplomatic push being undertaken by the interim president. I'll explain to you why. There is a difference between a territory and a country, and there is a big difference between a state and a territory. So was Southern Cameroon a country of its own? The answer is yes, and I'll explain to you why, so that a lot of people can understand. A territory, like you would classify a trustee territory, because the argument most of them are making is that British Southern Cameroon was a trustee territory and we were never a country. A territory is a territorial representative of a government, of another government. That means the territory of former British Cameroon was not a country on its merits. It was an administered territory. It was called a territory. A territory, an example of a territory will be a place where they don't have a government of their own. Governments on a territory are appointed or nominated by a central government. For example, if you are in a federal state or an autonomous region, the central government appoints the head of a territory, or maybe it's a small village or somewhere that is called a territory. So yes, the British Southern Cameroon started up as a territory, but we had progressed. In 1953, is it 1953 or 1953, when Ndele became the first prime minister, when we were in Onugu, it was still in the state of progression. We were still considered as a quasi-self-governance, because we were controlled by the British by indirect rule through Nigeria. So at the stage of Ndele being the prime minister of Southern Cameroon, we had attained a level of evolution. The territory had evolved into a quasi-self-governance state, where with Ndele as the head of the prime minister. So how did we come from a territory to become a country? When did Southern Cameroon become a country of its own? When we had our first election, because the difference between a state and a territory is that a state has its self-governance. That means its governor or its prime minister or its elected executive is not appointed by a central government. It is directly elected. So when we attain a evolutionary development where the British Southern Cameroonians could elect their own prime minister, Ndele led a delegation to England, and the Queen of England, the current Queen of England, upgraded the status of the British Trust Territory into a self-governance, from a quasi-self-governing territory, John Gufoncha, from a quasi-self-governance into a self-governance state. So we moved in 1955 from a quasi-self-governance to a self-governance state. So we were no longer considered as a territory. So once that step was taken, that we are now self-governance, we have a functional democracy, we have functional institutions, we could organize elections, we could develop our own police force, we could enforce our own law and order. That stage is what triggered the United Nations consideration of our territory for independence. That is why John Gufoncha could apply for the Queen of England to give us our independence, because we were no longer a territory. By definition, we became a state. there is no difference between a state and a country. A state and a country are two interchangeable words. So if you are a state, you are a country. But a state describes the existence of an administration of that entity, that legal entity. For example, you have the United States of America. It exists as a state and as a country as well. So the United States of America is a country. So the state of British Southern Cameroon is a country. Those are two interchangeable words for people who have studied law and political science. So once we become a state, that is why we could be considered for independence. And remember, the German Cameroon, the Cameroon with K, never attended the evolution of self-governance in any shape or form. That is why, legally speaking, the German Cameroon with K was a property of German. We did not possess, when they were partitioning the German Cameroon, we could not be on the table because we had not evolved politically to be able to represent ourselves and organize ourselves as an entity of that state. The authority of that state and the possessor of that state was German.